This video is brought to you by GameMaker. And if you've ever wanted to get into game development, GameMaker does this really crazy thing where it's free. Just start making and only pay when you want to release your game to the world commercially.
It's fast, it's user-friendly, and there's easy-to-follow tutorials, plus a dedicated community to help answer even my questions. How make man jump? GameMaker is a 2D game engine that's helped bring some of yours and my favorite recent experiences to life, like UFO 50, Chicory, Anton Blast, and of course, Yahtzee's own Starstruck Vagabond.
Ooh, we talking about GameMaker? I love that program, it's so easy to use. As well as Starstruck Vagabond, I also used it to make all 12 projects in my 12 games in 12 months Dev Diary challenge. And I couldn't believe how much sex I got out of that. None. I got none at all. Which I couldn't believe.
So what are you waiting for? Head on over to the GameMaker link in the description and start cracking away today, because we want to play your game.
Yeah, looking through this list, I'm seeing one of you made Armpit Fart Tycoon, and I've got several questions for you. Hello, and welcome to Dev Heads, the podcast focused on. Wait, I've completely messed up the intro. Just
no, you're
evaporated
good.
from my brain.
Keep going. Stop.
No. Hello.
Podcast focused on the
Heads.
ins, outs, and goings on of game development, with host experience ranging from indie, double to AAA. I'm Jay. We got through it, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host Tina.
Hi, I worked on COD, Apex Legends, and God of War, representing AAA.
And Mikey.
Ooh, I like this, Tina. I'll go too. Hi, I'm Mikey. I worked on the Insurgency series, Black Mesa, and at Meta for a bit, representing mostly AA.
Beautiful. And today we have a wonderful guest that I'm super excited to have with us, Mr. Alex Hutchinson. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Lovely to be here. Been doing this about 20-something years. Started on handheld games on the Game Boy in Australia for Activision. Worked in AAA as the creative director on Far Cry 4, Assassin's Creed 3, Army of Two 40th Day, and a lead designer at Masters for many years as well on Sims 2, Spore, and other bits and pieces. And the most important thing, we just shipped our latest game as an indie developer, so I don't even know what I am, indie or double or AAA. Yesterday,
All of the above.
Yeah, exactly. Just a big bucket. Revenge of the Savage Planet, which is out on almost every platform, including PS4, bizarrely, in a little bit, and came out yesterday. Please buy it and keep us employed.
Yesterday.
Let's hear that name again.
Congratulations.
What's the name and where can they get it?
Revenge of the Savage Planet, out now, PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Epic Store, Steam, and then there's a PS4 version coming down the track. And we just got our Switch 2 dev kits in, so maybe even there in the future.
Damn, you managed to get on. That's awesome. That's really, really cool. That's a lot of platforms to
It was foolish.
to have in line.
It was not so
It was
much.
foolish.
Yeah, I think that's where you realize where the bucket comes in. We've still got AAA brains trapped in indie bodies now. So we tried to do it the way we always did. We thought SimShip, all platforms, physical release, all that sort of stuff. So we bit off a lot. But so far so good. You know, reviews have been positive and it's out there. So we've got some bugs we're fixing. We're hacking in keyboard remapping for Steam right now, hopefully out later today. So we're still actively poking at it.
Amazing, man. Like I got to play it. This is where we met at GDC. I got to play it a few months back, and I was kind of blown away with the level, like the scope at which you guys have been able to achieve with the team you had. Not even considering porting it to so many different consoles and stuff like that. That just blows my mind. But what's interesting for me about this game and what you guys have been doing is the shift in design perspective from your first game to the second. Can you speak a little bit about, the ideas to do that?
Yeah, so we went from first person. The original game was a bit like a Metroid Prime, sort of first person exploration, like turn over every rock, shoot the odd thing, but hopefully de-emphasizing shooting. So it's an exploration-based game, sci-fi, wacky, and hopefully funny. We're trying to put humor in the pat. But I think what you're talking about is that we switched from first person to third person. And a lot of that was most of the team had worked on, like people who worked on the Arkham series, and they'd worked on Assassin's Creed, and they worked on a lot of third person games. And I think they wanted to put more personality in the character. And there's only 30 of us. So when your entire animation team, which is Mike Manillo, wants to do it, we have to agree generally. So it was a choice. I think it lets you platform more easily. You can see your feet. Let's just put sort of customizable gear in, which is fun, especially in a co-op game, to differentiate yourself. And as you always said, it's very hard to put jokes in hands. So we can put a lot more humor in setting you on fire or freezing you or drowning you.
100%, yeah. Also, like because of the multiplayer aspect, in a way, you have the animations already because they have to be viewable from the other perspective. So it kind of makes sense. Everything you just said, it seemed like the natural evolution for the game, in my opinion. But the thing that we're really interested in, and I am specifically, we spoke about this a little bit while I was at GDC, but a little bit of it's under wraps on my end of what I'm working on personally. But I'm really interested to hear about how you have approached the idea of designing a Metroidvania, and specifically in a multiplayer setting. Like, how do you do that? Like, that seems very daunting.
Yeah, I think the fun bit, the goal was to have sort of a wide lens Metroidvania, so it's a semi-open world Metroidvania. So we sort of saw the environment or the map as a big onion. So you start in the center of the onion, and there's an obvious gate that you need to get by, which requires a skill upgrade or a piece of gear. And then you have to navigate, explore all that space to find the right upgrade, to get a bigger piece of the onion, and then it expands and expands, and then you sort of involve backtracking along the way. So intellectually, it's not much different. And then as long as you lock the players in terms of their progression. So basically, if I get an upgrade, your partner gets the upgrade. They can't get ahead in the so to speak onion. So it sort of works. And then we just peppered that in an open world sense that you always know where your main objective is, but we're trying to distract you, basically. We're always trying to make you stop doing the main quest and go and do something else and smell the flowers and all that sort of stuff. So that was the general philosophy for it.
Yeah, 100%. There's this philosophy like with level design, which is I always think back to the games like Skyrim. If you're in like some Draugr cave or whatever, there's usually a path of progression. There's the path that will take you to the end boss and take you out of the dungeon. But then there are side paths that will lead to maybe side objectives and or some loot and stuff like that. And what I've seen in a lot of playtests and stuff like that is that players will naturally try and sniff out not the path of progression, but the other paths. And a lot of the times I find that level designers get into this trap, which is over signifying the side path with, say, your lighting and all of your different signifiers, so that it subconsciously looks like the main path. And then players will go down the main path thinking it's the side path. And then they're like, oh no. And I think that's because it's enclosed and you only really have two options. In an open world, you're making your job a lot harder, but also simultaneously easier in certain aspects.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in don't engage with problems if you don't have to in design. We can often make it harder for ourselves. And so the fun thing about keeping it a bit open is we don't really have to worry so much about difficulty spikes or places where people get stuck, because the frustration bleeds out when they can just abandon it for a moment and go somewhere else.
Of course.
So I like that in general, to have multiple routes. And I also think it encourages curiosity, and people in general are much more engaged when they can do what they want, mostly, within obviously constraints and the confines of the world, than if we try to force them down the track and make them perform a sequence of actions. Then it feels a bit rote, and you can sometimes get that, and you can even get it in open world. We got it for a while in the sort of later stage UB games, or more recent, where they started to feel a bit like a checklist. And you don't feel like you're doing anything. You feel like you're erasing problems. And so your end feeling isn't satisfaction. It's sort of like relief. And I don't think that's the feeling, that you want at the end of the game.
It's something we've talked about here on the podcast. I remember, I think I forget when I first heard it, but I heard it somewhere online. The phrase of like painting the map in a Far Cry game, for example, was something that I felt like you run into this sort of late game stage where you realize, wait, like this is starting to get a little bit repetitive. Also, I'm really powerful now, so I'm less challenged by every time I do it. It's not unique, to Ubisoft late stage games. I'm thinking about like XCOM and a lot of those. When you get to the later stages, it's hard to keep that sense of scrappiness that makes you want to do better and get more stuff, because you also have this conflict of you want the player to feel like they did progress and they are more powerful. It's a tricky problem to resolve.
Yeah, there's the games will try and tackle this in different ways to varying levels of success. One that I feel tried to do something and I feel like it failed was, I'm going to sound blasphemous here, Breath of the Wild. Fantastic game, an amazing open world, really, really good at using its verticality and vantage to signify points of progression and ways to explore. Amazing. How it tried to tackle that kind of late game urge to continually explore was with its weapon degradation system and having its durability. And it kind of, for me and for a lot of players, it had the inverse effect, which was it made all rewards meaningless rather than drive to continually get them. It made me not care about this legendary sword that I got because I know that in 5 swings it's going to break. How you fix it is really tricky.
I felt that, and go ahead, Alex.
It's just interesting to you talk about Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild is a very Far Cry game in a lot of ways.
100%.
And we spent a lot of time at Ubisoft reverse engineering Nintendo games, especially in the 2D space. Platformers and stuff. So it's fascinating to hear them talk a lot about Far Cry during the lead up to that release, and I could see it.
Oh yes.
I do see, Link would climb to the top of a hill and he'd look down. There's an outpost with a wisp of smoke, and then he'd glide down to the outpost.
Oh, it's exactly the same.
And we on the Far Cry team were going, that's our stuff. So it was. I think it was like the best compliment I ever received in the games industry to have Zelda people looking at the games that we'd made. So that was kind
100%.
of cool. But then it's not surprising that they have the same feeling late in, because once you have all that freedom, it's hard to fill it.
Yeah. And keep that motivation going, right? And that's why I really like the Metroidvania formula within the context of an open world. Your analogy of speaking about an onion is beautiful there, because peeling back, or I guess instead of peeling layers off, you're growing out from the inside. That gives people not an endless, but heavy amounts of goals to work towards, and they are pinned off from progressing to the next layer effectively until they have solved that problem, which means you have this level of freedom to backtrack with the new things you have, but also a blockade and an obvious goal for the next thing. So even when you do get not necessarily bored, but you've completed what you think you can do with the backtracking, you have that goal to go back to. And that was something I think games like Breath of the Wild struggle with, is once you've done, say, what they call the divine beasts, once you've done that, your solid concrete goals kind of dissolve until you go to defeat Ganon, and that just ends the game. And a similar thing with Elden Ring and stuff like that. I think they could take a lot from learning from the Metroidvania formula. It's good.
I'm just looking at the Raccoon Logic website. Is there really only 32 of you?
Yeah, there's 32 of us, and then we did some outsourcing. So it's really tricky sometimes in the space. We're competing with stuff, and we read in reviews people saying well, you don't have all these sort of accessibility features any AAA game. You're there's only 32 of us. There's not much. We'll get to as much as we can, but yeah, we're a really small crew.
How much did you outsource, and in what areas did you focus that?
So I realized on the first game, I had a rule years ago, which I would never do live action in a game. I thought it was a cop-out. I didn't like it at all. And then we got to a point where we realized on the first game that we had to have some kind of cinematic support just to push the narrative. The narrative is very player responsive. You do things and then we reply. But we still needed some. And I realized this is awful, that it was cheaper to hire actors, build sets and props and film it than it was to do it in-game. So we ended up doing live action, and we continued with the outsourcing for that. And then we did a bunch of fake ads and weird things, which you can pull up, and things like New Grob or New Grob 2 or Grob, those sorts of things, strange future products that we advertise in your habitat whenever you get stuck back there. So we did that. We had a little bit of modeling outsourcing. We had a couple of guys come in for a year, 2 guys on the modeling side. We had a VFX person come in. So we've had a few people, but it's not, we outsourced a lot of the audio recording. Although we have 1 sound person. So it seems like a lot, QA, Loc, that sort of stuff we outsource, but not a huge amount of production.
Yeah, that sounds pretty normal to me. A little bit of art. I mean, to outsource I assume you mean like with voiceover and stuff. You worked with an agency. It sounds like, right?
We directed it, but we didn't process it or cut it up and all that. So we worked with Pixel Audio here.
Got you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think speaking of the live action, it's really interesting to hear that you were very against it until there was like a necessity for it, based on budget and what was happening. Has your opinion kind of changed as time has gone? Because I feel like it's got a certain level of charm to it. I always think back to like Abduction and old school, like Myst games and stuff like that. I like it.
I always think of that guy, the guy from not Family Ties, from the other one, Growing Pains. I forget what the game was. Yeah, that lead actor, he was in a game where he was always in a Hessian sack yelling at the screen, and it was very strange, like an early CD-ROM game.
Really? I'm thinking of Phantasmagoria. And all the weird ones.
It's like light nudity. There you go.
What?
So no, I think I talked myself into it on this one. I still think in the main, I don't like it, but I think it does fit our game because mentally I always thought, in the game we're sending someone from Earth to a science fiction, fantasy location. So that looks like that, but when Earth calls them, it still looks like Earth. So all of the live action stuff are broadcast from Earth. So in my head, it really made sense that you have this window on the wall that shows you Earth, but you're stuck in the Savage, planet universe. And so it kind of worked. And then when we started doing these sort of weird 90s infomercials, they made me laugh. And I did enjoy that part of it.
100%, yeah.
It reminds me weirdly of SpongeBob, where like everybody above the water is
That's it. Yeah, good point. And we got a lot of Tim and Eric comparisons as well. Like,
I feel that.
And just as a petty game developer point, it was really nice to have one chunk of the game I could work on with other people that could be locked. And then, like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't going to be affected by a change in the render, or it wasn't going to be affected by a change in that, because it was live action, so it could be its own thing. So I found that strangely satisfying to be making these weird scatological ads and then in the background. It kept me alive during the middle of production, which I always called the Valley of Despair.
Valley of Despair.
Valley of Despair. I want to hear more about that.
Let's talk about the Valley of Despair.
Yeah, exciting at the start, exciting at the end, and then when you first implement all of your ideas and you realize how far from complete they are, and maybe you're not sure now that they're that great, that's the Valley of Despair. And you sit in the Valley of Despair for like 50% of production, and you have to not choose to change your ideas too much or let everyone use your despair to make a different game, because otherwise trash will kill you. So then you have to just climb out. You have to climb out of it.
I feel like I'm sinking in.
It's extremely painful.
I feel like I'm currently on my decline into the Valley of Despair with my game.
Oh no!
I've locked things. I've locked mechanics. I've iterated on them and got to the point. I've spoken to many industry vets that have vastly more experience than me, and they've told me a lot of the ideas are really cool, and I'm being vague here because I haven't revealed to the audience what it all is, but they've also told me, here are some of the issues you're going to run into. And I've just started running into those issues. And I've gone from exciting to, oh no, all of this has to be ironed out. And I've got to do it, right? Because I'm indie. So I've got to do all of that myself. So I think I'm on the decline into the pit of despair. But hey, you got to trudge through it. That's how games are made.
Yeah, it doesn't. You have to finish it. If you don't finish things, you become very good at starting things, and that's not really,
of course,
useful. You know what I mean? Going through the arc, I think, from start to finish, and everything will be super useful, even if it it doesn't get there in the end. So I think, it's tricky.
Well, you know what they say, right? It's temporary, right? You just got to push through that stuff.
Well, pain is weakness leaving the body.
You can say that too, yeah. I have an interesting topic that I feel like I want to cover. You kind of mentioned it earlier, Alex, and it's about being funny. And this is kind of a question for us, but it's also for the chat. What are some of like the funniest games you guys have played and can think of? I feel like humor in games is very hard because it's like another expectation on top of making the game fun, et cetera, et cetera. And you have like virtually almost no control of timing and all these other things because it's an interactive medium, right?
Yeah.
Jay's pointing at me.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. It's all timing.
Right.
It's the same with narrative, right? How do you control narrative beats when this is why a lot of games, once you get into points of narrative, go into in-game cutscenes or pre-rendered cutscenes, because they can control the timing and pacing and the movement of the player. If you're meant to be watching a player cradling their loved one as they die, and they turn the camera to look at the big billboard on the side and just ignore what's happening,
That's kind of funny.
you don't have that chance, right? So it is, right? But if you want it to land, it's the same with jokes. Jokes are all about the unexpected. That's the thing that makes us laugh usually, or expecting something and it being a subversion. And timing. And if the player can look around and move away and miss certain aspects, it all falls apart. So that's why I think a lot of funny games fall down.
And I think it's interesting because the premise for the first game was that humor is a huge, part of movies. It's a huge segment in books, in magazines, every other art form, basically, except for video games. And I think a lot of the issues you guys brought up are the reasons it's been difficult. But I think it's because we're trying to tackle it historically as in the same way that a passive medium would tackle it, right? Which requires timing. I think our premise has been that the funniest things that ever happened, for instance, for me, was when we put co-op into Far Cry 4, and I was sitting there, and I've told this story a lot, but I wanted to throw a Molotov cocktail and hit an enemy. Instead, I missed the enemy, and I hit a bear, and the bear caught on fire, and then the burning bear killed my friend. And it was the funniest thing that had ever happened. It's because the comedy was in the pad. The comedy wasn't in the script. So you can put it in there as well. But a video game is primarily, as we know, interactive. And so the comedy has to be interactive comedy. So the timing is the player, right? It's the player who's doing the, if I'm trying to perform a joke for you in a game, this is like a movie, right? It's not appropriate. I want to create situations where the player performs the joke themselves. And so that's what we try to create. So the basic idea is we have tasks in the game that are tricky, and you have tools that are inadequate, and then you have consequences that are epic, right? And you do these three things together, and generally someone's going to set their friend on fire, do that stuff. And then you combine that with the fact that you embrace players aren't going to stand there and look at your beautiful piece of art. They're going to grief you, and then you let that and you pay that off. So, like me writing a one-liner is funny once, but me letting you kick your best friend off a cliff to his death is funny forever. Like these
create the systems so you can allow for that ludo narrative to take form from the player's hands. Like it's like I talk about it a lot in my episodes about manufactured ludo narrative, where we skew with certain aspects of design to make the player feel as if they did a thing and it feels player driven. Parry systems are ones that do this a lot. You can introduce parry systems into games, and then in big epic moments make the parry windows very large so the player will nearly always get them, but they feel as if they hit this really tight thing. They feel like they did that, and that's us manufacturing ludo narrative. And it's all about systems, like creating systems so you can allow for these crazy things to happen. I'm trying to think back to your question, Mikey, about like the funniest game I've played recently. It's a tough question.
Yeah, or just a funny game. While you think on that, let me read a couple from the chat. Or Tia, go ahead. Yeah, then I'll read.
So if you're a fan of Rick and Morty, right? Squanch Games did High on Life.
High on Life,
was pretty funny.
It looked a lot like the first Savage Planet. That's what we thought.
Really?
Exactly like the first time
you're narrowing your eyes.
Like the first Savage Planet.
Beef. Yeah.
we like Rick and Morty. We ripped them off a bit, so that's all.
They're taking your open world designs, Alex. They're taking
but it was like a
environments.
First person comedy game. It just I don't know. It seemed like
it's true though. Like Eric, if you let this trailer play out for a little bit and then pull up the trailer for the first Savage Planet game, it's very similar.
I'm watching. This is.
We didn't have talking bullets. That's from Stranger's Wrath.
Oh my
Stranger's
God,
Wrath.
Cool.
Hell yeah, the Oddworld game you're talking about, right? The Wild West one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like some of the screenshots from we were like, is that us?
That's amazing.
I get what you mean. I would feel a bit suspicious too. When you work in like the milsim-ish genre, which is where I do, there's a lot of this kind of like, wait, like who did that first? Did we get that from them, or did they get that? We have the same thoughts, but I do think we're all kind of pulling from a lot.
No, we're all the same land. That's the thing. I remember when we put the naval stuff into Assassin's Creed on Assassin's Creed 3. People later, like our sound guy who was at the time working somewhere else, the people who were making a Pirates of the Caribbean game, which got cancelled or whatever, was certain that we somehow got their code. You're like, no, man.
How did you get this?
How? And we didn't even know you were there. And then we somehow put it into, Anvil, like the custom AC engine. Anyway, it was just funny that, yeah.
I like to joke with my close friends that we're all just Fortnite R&D developers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. Oh, that's sad. Like it's Friday and I can start drinking soon.
Sorry, Mikey, I cut you off.
That's okay. I was just gonna say, for me, it was my experience with this. At least one of them was on Insurgency Sandstorm. I worked with an artist and UI designer, Arthur, and he and I made like a system for representing reloads for magazines because it's a realistic game. So your magazines for your guns don't all combine into one. They're represented as like little silhouettes down at the corner of the screen. So if you shoot halfway through a magazine, you come back to it later, it still has half bullets in it. It doesn't get combined with the other remnants. And it was a very elegant, very simple, very, very clean UI representation. And I saw an Arma Reforger a few years later. And I thought, interesting. I wonder if they were inspired. But to be fair, we took a lot of inspiration from SWAT 4. That had a similar system. It wasn't one-to-one, but it was similar. So, that's at least how I try to interpret it. That being said, there's definitely instances where somebody just like straight up rips, and you just kind of got to accept it, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I think also, like, I always try to tell young designers or new designers, I say young now, that just means I'm old, try to say, you should be taking 80% of something from somewhere else. You do not want to innovate on 100% of the content in your game. This is insanity. And you'll end up with, something awful. Like pick the bits where you want to differentiate yourself and where you're really excited and you think this is strong. And then if you just want, for example, like you were saying, like how a reticle works for a shooter, just pick your favorite and do it exactly like that. Like, this is not a point of innovation. Like, it's not interesting. So yeah, I agree. It's not, we're all sharing and combining and.
Yeah, it sort of has to be a combination. For one, like, I mean, if you were to look at it from a business sense, like every new innovation is at least a little bit of a risk. And that's not like a nice thing to acknowledge, but it's true, right? You have to innovate. You have to, even if it was only out of cynicism, not out of art, you have to do stuff different because otherwise people aren't going to get something they can get somewhere else, but better or already there. So, it's a balance, right? It's a balance of all these things. Basically, there's no problem being inspired by others. It just depends on how much the inspiration's taken and how much you actually took it somewhere else. We're all, what's the phrase by Noon? We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, whatever it is. Yeah,
I like that.
Let me read some of these comments before we forget them. So, funny games people were mentioning. Portal, yeah, obviously for sure.
Yeah.
Psychonauts, ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, Psychonauts was funny. Stanley Parable, Helldivers 2. Yeah, Helldivers 2 was fucking on lock, man. Right out the gate.
Yeah, and those first three are script funny, which is fine. That's a form of humor, but I think it's not as interesting, not to besmirch those games, but not as interesting because they're funny in a way that a movie is funny or a TV show is funny. But Helldivers 2 is funny in a video game specific, unique way. You know what I mean? Like the chaos that comes out of that. That's so that out of the four of them, that's the one I would.
Because it's
agree.
Systemic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's when I think to Stanley Parable or Portal, they're fantastic games. Like, don't get me wrong. I think they're wonderful, but they are funny. Stanley Parable, for example, is funny through subversion, and genre subversion is similar with games from Daniel Mullins. Super hardcore. Daniel Mullins does the same thing with his design subversions. You're expecting something, and there's like a foil and a switch, and the joke lands. But that means the replayability of those in a humor sense is not really there because you understand the punchline that's going to come. Just like comedy movies are the funniest the first time you watch them. They're still funny the second time through. But just like Alex is mentioning with when you create systems to create ludonarrative and humor through play, they can be repeatedly funny through repeated playthroughs. So there's a lot more strength there.
We're forgetting the South Park games. Those can be pretty fun.
So my friend Francois Belland was the lead producer on the second one of those. It was my producer on Assassin's Creed.
It was called Fractured Butthole. I just
Fractured Butthole. Fractured
Yes.
Butthole. Yes.
What a name. Sorry, you were saying, tell us more about your friend or your lead producer.
Oh, no, it's just that it's funny. Yeah. It's like we worked together on Assassins, and then he went down to San Francisco to work with everyone on the Fractured Butthole.
I can't imagine what it's like to work on a game like that, because the JIRAs must be almost HR violation tasks and requests. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's been interesting. That was probably, not to go off topic, but our time at Google was most interesting for me from how different true corporate America is from even corporate games. You know what I mean? And the fear and the paralysis that operates in those organizations just was I was like, oh, even the worst corporate gig in games still felt more human than that place. So that was an experience.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. It is a different standard, when you move to a company like that. And yeah, I can imagine the JIRAs too. I run into this working but it's in the context of people talking casually about really violent things, like when you make an FPS. But it's a whole other level when it's I'm not sure how I feel about the poop mesh. It should be a little more dark brown, I feel like. Instead,
I was there saying
the other guy's
I wanted the headshot to be like a pumpkin hitting cement that I dropped off a window, and then you're doing awful things like you're combing the internet and playing heads popping at high volume. You know what I mean? I think I could never explain to Google and why I found it so uncomfortable was the intent is a big part of it. Like an offensive sentence is one thing, but I can police what I say and be even more awful, but never cross any sort of objective line. You know what I mean? So I think if you're making a South Park game, you should know what you've signed up for. The bigger challenge would be when you were trying to start South Park and you've got a whole bunch of animators and a whole bunch of people, and you're like, so we're going to make the hardest setting, based on the color of your skin in the creator character, and then and so some people are going to go, that's hilarious. And some people are going to be like, I am deeply offended. And you have to be like, then we're not going to not do it. You don't want to make this game.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of thing that was impossible to explain in corporate. You're like, no, the game is funny and gross. It's full of gross stuff, right? That creature looks like a dildo for a reason. And they're like, well, it shouldn't look like a dildo. You're like, it's funny because it looks like a dildo and it runs at you, right? Like that's, that's, and so I find that the trickiest bit, to get the team aligned, because there's no right answer or wrong answer, right? It's like, get the team aligned on what this answer is, in this specific moment.
Alex, I feel like you and I are going to be best friends because your humor probably matches up a lot with mine.
Well, yes. And you married an Australian, so it's in the style.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember American Mekee's Bad Day LA. It came out in, 2006.
No, I don't remember that at all.
It didn't sell super well, but American Mikee came from the id Software days. I think he met John Carmack in a parking lot working on cars or something. I can't remember from the book. But yeah, it was weird, right? But it's on Masters of Doom or John Romero's autobiography. Both great reads. But basically, one of the things I remember him not complaining about, but talking about with the game when it wasn't too much of a success, was it was hard for him to translate to his team what the sense of humor was and trying to deliver that, because he was working, I think it was because it was working with an East Asian studio in Hong Kong or something, and the English style goofy, it was kind of South Parky, I guess you could say, humor didn't really work very well, among other things. I think there was also a buggy release, I can't remember, but talking about what you're just saying, Alex, of trying to communicate to the team this is funny is hard sometimes.
It's hard. And another, that's also in the valley of despair, right? Where you're like I had 2 years of people saying, it's not that funny. You said it was going to be funny. It's not that funny. And you're like, well, I find parts of it funny. And you're like, I don't know what to say. And then trying to stick with it long enough, because also a lot of it required polish. Just go back, and it's not a real example. The dildo creature that runs at you, it would have to have a certain, physics tuned, and it would have to have, the right amount of viscosity and all this, so it's a lot of little weird things at the end to make it from sort of dumb to funny. So you have to trust the process. And so I find myself in the middle of projects or whatever they are, fighting thrash. Like people try to fix the idea by changing the idea instead of finishing the idea and trying to make like say, no, just we're not going to have that go get to the end. And so it's one of the upsides though of a smaller team of 30 people because it's not that many people to convince, whereas if you have a few hundred or, more horrifically, then I think it's a real and you need to yeah.
Alex, can you think of a time where you had to really rally the team to believe in the humor and then you eventually found it in the end? Like, what's the prime example of that you could think of?
There's a bunch of little ones on the first one. So a good one example on a design podcast is sometimes everyone, like that old joke, everything looks right. Every problem looks like a nail to a hammer, kind of. They want to solve it in their own way.
Yeah.
So the design team is very keen on, making all of the different moves have value and all of the weapons have, are fair and all that sort of stuff. And I just wanted to kick the shit out of a bird.
Wait, you just went quiet, Alex.
You just went quiet.
You guys hear him?
No, he muted himself.
We heard.
This is the joke.
Kick the shit out of a bird.
This is the joke.
And then it went flat.
And you're still silent. You're still silent,
Can't
Alex.
hear you.
You're muted on Discord.
You're muted. Why are you muted?
It's
Oh my god, my face is red.
This is a bit, right? This is a bit.
It's a bit. Okay, got it.
A bit. Yeah. Oh, no, that would have been way.
That wasn't a bit.
That wasn't a bit.
My phone auto muted itself. It heard kick the shit out of a bird and it turned itself off.
Censoring you.
Oh,
Google again.
That got me good.
Google again. What I was saying was, you can edit this out in post. Oh, we're live.
We're live. My face is red. Oh my god.
You need to breathe in and out.
And I just wanted to kick the bird as hard as possible into a wall. And they're like, you can't, then why would I use the gun? I'm like, who cares? It's funny. So I just wanted that joke. And so the design team was against it because they thought it was OP and they thought it was pointless and all that sort of stuff. And in the end, it was, with and it's a pure realization thing where basically the bird has to look funny. The wind has to be good, or, the slap. We had a grandma slap in the first game. And I just wanted, so if you hit X, you slap. And if you hold X, it becomes like a grandma slap.
Grandma slap. Wait, is it grandma slap when you shake?
Yeah,
it's the back. It's the backhand. It's like a pimp slap.
Got it.
You gotta
Pimps and grandmas. Got it.
I would pay for
There's a lot of
DLC
crossover.
where it was an offensive slap where the fingers were left open.
Yes, it's rude, man. It's not designed to wound you. It's humiliating.
Oh my god.
Or like having a creature look handy capable and the art team's like, it looks stupid, and you're like, no, that's the joke, it's meant to look stupid. And they're like, it looks like I can't model a face. You're like, well, that's the joke.
Put that in your portfolio. That's another
the
joke.
It's like I said, I want it to look like if you drew the face in art class, they'd give you a D. That's what I want it to look like.
Not an F, a D. So,
A D.
a little competency there.
Yeah, you got a D.
Oh my god. I think there was something fascinating you said about not seeing the joke or the design to completion. I think that can be applied to a lot of different aspects. I'm currently working on my art pipeline and working on some post-processing
I'm sorry, I
systems.
can't
You still is it
Tina's comedy, Tina.
For those of you who are listening and can't see, Tina's face is beet red. She's wiping both eyes.
She's crying.
Tears away, and she's smiling and laughing.
She's broken.
Sorry, Jay. We should
That's
return to the
right.
pipeline.
I just love imagining an art review where you're like, make it look like shit. I said make it look like fucking shit.
It looks like you can
What the hell is this? This looks great.
The problem is that it has to look like you deliberately made it shit, or it's not funny, it's just crap. You see what I mean? It's very carefully off center. It can't look like it's a model. That's not funny.
I would love to work on a game like that.
I'm
That
understanding.
sounds awesome.
One last note, and then Jay, we should talk about
Yeah,
this
yeah,
thing. I'm feel like I'm
sorry
because you're the creative director on Far Cry 4, right?
Yeah.
If I remember right. Yeah. That's making sense now because I'm thinking about the sense of humor in Far Cry 4.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of what we're talking about here made its way into that.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think it's and then, we had a fake ending at the start of the game. I don't know if you know, because I was being driven crazy by people saying ludonarrative dissonance, and they were like, all this like, oh, I'm here to bury my mother, and I'm like, no one is buying a Far Cry game to bury the mother that they've never met in a bucket that they'll never see. It's bullshit. And so they're like, no, I'm like, oh my God, that's the story. But the joke is, you're here to shoot the shit out of things and blow up a car. So we put a scene in at the start, because I was like, how can we do it where everyone lies in cutscenes, right? In cinematics, you have no agency in the cinematic, it's just delivered. So I wanted the villain to come out at the start and say, why are you here? And you say, I'm here to bury my mother. And he says, wait here. And he goes away. If you wait 5 minutes, not an hour, like 5 minutes, he comes back. He goes, oh, and he flies you in a helicopter to the end of the game, and you bury your mother, and no one dies. And 99.9% of people, as soon as he leaves, pick up a shotgun and just go shoot everybody. So no one saw it. So that was a joke just for me. That was just for me.
But
you know
people
what's
love that.
I love hearing that because this is my sister's favorite game of all time. She played it like 50 times easily.
That's
and
awesome.
She was the one that told me about just waiting on the bus. She was like, I'm gonna wait and see what happens.
I wished so badly that this could have been done in Spec Ops: The Line. I feel like Spec Ops: The Line's messaging could have been better if right at the beginning you could have went like, oh my God, there's only 3 of us. We're in way over our heads. And you get on the radio and you go like, we have to go. This won't work. We'll make things worse.
And I also love rolling the credits early and upsetting players. That's another joke that's just for me. Like if you can get them, they paid their $60 and now they're 5 minutes in and it looks like it's over. That makes me laugh.
Okay. So are there any films or TV shows that have inspired your humor recently?
I was a big the humor mostly probably by books by Douglas Adams, by The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and So Thanks for All the Fish and all that sort of stuff. So that a lot of British BBC comedies. The young ones and Bottom were big for me growing up.
Hell yeah, dude! Let's go.
Yeah, sort of the deadpan. And then there was a bit of Rick and Morty, especially on the team. So that's been great. But like Toast of London and all that sort of stuff, I think are fantastic.
Dude, you're a big British comedy dude. These are obscure British things. I dig this.
We were settled by you guys.
Yeah, I mean, fair. That makes sense. Did you, how are you accessing
that part's
those?
Not funny. That's not the funny part.
No, that's not funny. I mean, you're laughing, Tina, so I don't know. I don't know what you're saying. How are you getting those pieces of media? Because a lot of the people I speak to in America, I'll name things like Bottom or the Mighty Boosh or stuff like that, and they have like no idea what these things are.
Oh, the Mighty Boosh, really? That's pretty popular.
Yeah, most people aren't.
Even I've heard of that. I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
It's like my favorite show.
Live at the Melbourne Fringe Festival, I think in like '98 or something.
Damn.
I moved to the States. I moved to California in 2004, and then I moved out here in 2009. So most of it's pre-millennium.
Yeah.
And these days it's mostly YouTube clips or things like that go around, and YouTube now can be like half the show, so you can get hold of it.
I've been watching a lot of Peep Show and like Baby Cow, the publisher the production company that makes a lot of those shows. They have a YouTube channel where they just post clips and clips and clips of like Alan Partridge and Mighty Boosh and stuff like that. So the audience is growing for that kind of subversive, satirical humor, British stuff. It's good.
What was this? A quick one. What was the Simon Pegg comedy where he's in his flat with the girl and the roommate? Spaced. Yeah. Did you guys like that one?
Yeah. All that sort of stuff. I think there's a sort of a darkness too that I like a grimness to the British, and you see it even in everything from comics today, like the difference between, say, 2000 AD and Judge Dredd and everything, and, DC Comics and Superman and Batman. Like the American grim is nowhere near as grim as you can go, or like Warhammer versus, StarCraft. I'm a fan of the darker edges, which always gets me into trouble in US corporate scenarios, you'd be shocked to know. But hopefully it helps in the game.
100%.
I do feel like your humor matches up with a lot of the people I worked with at Respawn who are not there anymore. But
I went to CDA in Redwood Shores, so we might have worked together at somewhere back in the day.
But is it harder to kind of get that not convincing people of the humor or seeing it to completion, but is it more difficult in a AAA space to just get those things through the net, basically, and be like, it's horrible.
Well, the more you spend, the more risk there is. So the bigger the budget, the bigger the risk, and the more you have to iron off or shave off the dangerous edges. And I think that's the fun part of being indie is that, like we have I mean, it does affect your reviews in a way, but I think like some areas will be like, oh, there's too much scatological humor. And, and then some people couldn't reconcile a serious, rather an earnest game underneath a ridiculous layer.
Like shit.
You couldn't process that you could do both, which I just don't agree with. I think you can. I think, it's possible. So you get more reaction, but we always say in the studio that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And the worst thing you do for a game is that everyone gives you a 6. You know what I mean? I want a bunch of 9s and I don't mind a bunch of 0s. Like, I'm really not bothered because it means that everyone reacted to it and it made an impression. And it's ridiculous to expect that you make something that, like any genre of music and you're going to play it even to music lovers and everyone's going to be like, I love it. It's just not. So I don't like the homogeneity and grind to the grays and the beiges that happen at that.
Yeah. Art's designed to elicit emotion, right?
Yeah.
It's whether that's a 0 or a 10, right?
Yeah.
I really.
Sorry.
No, finish your thought, and then I have a question for you.
But the Ubi, when Ubi was at its best, we could still sneak shit in. Like I didn't have to go through. Like I wouldn't get into trouble in France by sneaking in like that fake start ending or some things that were a bit off color. EA was very controlling. But Ubi would let you, would not let you go overboard, but would let you push in a direction, which I thought it was a secret sauce for a while.
I got to jump in, Tina, because it's super relevant. Then to yours. How the fuck did you sneak Far Cry Blood Dragon in? That run really took me.
Oh my god, that DLC was amazing.
Yeah, that's an old friend called Dean Evans, and he comes from a marketing background, and he just had the vision for it. And the beauty that actually DLCs are great though because is that lower risk, right? It's a much smaller budget than the main game, and also most DLCs no one gives a shit about anyway. So I think he was able to, to run with it more and get it done. So I think, again, that was during what I consider the golden age of Ubisoft, and especially in Montreal, where, we did a bunch of AC 1, 2, 3, Black Flag, Far Cry 3, 4, 5, like all Blood Dragon, all these things, and some stuff. So it was a good run for a while, but like all things, the share price catches up with you.
Yeah,
it would.
If you gotta bring value to shareholders, that's what they say, right?
And you had the resources to do like all the wild art that you needed, right? Because you're Ubi, right? So you have all of these different people they're not stuck in one style of the art that they make. Yeah.
Yeah. The solution that Ubi had to the problem of big teams was really that there were small core teams everywhere, and then a huge art team that rolled around. You know what I mean? And so you could do 2 years on your game, and for the last year you had 400 artists roll in. So that was its secret sauce.
Yeah,
it's a lot of artists. Oh my god,
too many to be honest.
Yeah,
specialists, grass specialists.
Grass special. I'm sorry. Do you mean? Are you exaggerating? Or was there a grass specialist?
But you did have some people who were stuck on grass or dirt textures for a year.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that shit happens.
That's no fun.
What were you going to ask, Tina? Sorry.
So I have this imagination in my head and I need to fill it in with reality. Like there must be like one go-to person in your office, right? That's like the most bland, hard to impress, dull in the face, and you just practice all of your ideas or jokes on them, right?
Yes.
And are they an engineer?
Tina talking shit about the engineering team.
No, it's a. I just please answer and then I'll.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
Fucking nailed it.
Of course it is.
But it's always the way.
And why would you say that, Tina?
We would have a different test. Like my business partner, producer, reached out. We worked on and off for 20 years. He's a hardcore gamer of a casual flavor, which is a very strange thing. Like he's been playing and making games for 30 years, and he plays everything, but he just runs at it. He doesn't like tutorials. He doesn't like, so he's the best test to just give it to him to see if he understands what's going on. Because he's a knowledgeable but impatient like test case. So I think, yeah, similar question. Like, does this make sense to you? And then you find out.
Hell yeah. There you go. I love that.
So I don't feel like, maybe I missed it, but there, Jay's back. So Alex, like funniest games for you that you've played, like all throughout your experiences as a gamer. And Tina, I don't know if you said them as well, if you had a couple.
So for me, there on the other side, I think the GTA games are hilarious. And outside, in terms of this, like me running people over and stacking things up, I find bizarrely, a lot of racing games, like Burnout was pretty funny. Like because you're, like
very
like, and again, you were an agent of change. The Sims was pretty funny, like in getting things that to surprising, results to player actions. So yeah, I find the funny stuff, and then like anything with physics, being of the generation, which I think most of us on this podcast are, who saw Ragdoll enter, and before it was animated deaths, and then Ragdoll starts. The moment Ragdoll hit, I was like, that's funny. Like that, anything with Ragdoll, people falling off buildings. So Goat Simulator, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you feel like an agent of that, though, right? I think it always comes back to that, like, ludic humor of you. Even if it's Ragdoll and it's just the game taking over and effectively simulating that, you feel like an agent of it.
Yeah, and Ragdoll with horrifically loud impact sounds is twice as
and screaming.
Yes, and crying. Crying can be very funny in games.
I would trust you with my request that I've had for a little while, where you have a game with Bollywood physics. I think you could make that really funny.
Yeah,
crazy wire work.
I saw Far Cry 4. I was pitching Bollywood the whole time. Like, you know what I mean? Like in the code.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we don't know if you saw our Game Informer cover for that. It's a Rangoli, like it's a like a whole sort of color and sound, and just dial everything up. An easy way to get humor is small actions with large reactions. Is an easy way to get it going.
100%.
It's a good tip. I love this topic so much.
There was something I was going to say earlier. I didn't get to finish my thought of the idea of seeing things to completion and people not being able to see, the forest for the trees, and in a design aspect of like, here's a concept. And I've run into that issue with my art pipeline, which I mentioned earlier, creating post-processing effects to take care of a lot of things. And I've done about, I think, this drastic change in the art style, and showed someone the kind of half-done aspect of it, of like, the art style is built up of two aspects, and I showed them one half. And I showed it to them, and they were like, I don't like it, it's ugly. And I was like, okay, but imagine I'm going to make this system and this is going to be on top. What do you think that's a good direction? And they're like, yeah, but how it looks now is ugly. I don't like it. And I'm like, yeah, but you're only seeing half of what it's going to be. And they're like, yeah, but I don't like that half. And I'm like, yeah, but you're only seeing half, and it's really difficult. This person wasn't a game dev, so it's difficult to get across to a lot of people of like, you are seeing effectively a prototype, a small aspect of a larger picture. Please try and imagine the rest. What do you think of this one aspect? And that's difficult. Do you run into that issue?
But I think also you can't, if you're getting an opinion of a prototype from a consumer, it won't ever work, because they don't see things half done. But yeah, and I mean we often, I think, like, it's where you lean into relationships at work, where lots of people worked on and off together for like 15 years, and so there's an element of like they'll give you rope and keep working, which I think is really useful. Like, you're spending the points you earned over the years of working together, and so there's that level of trust. Because otherwise I think it's really hard. Like, I think we saw a lot, and we've seen it even talking to publishers again about the next game and stuff, where they had a lot of developers with individuals with great CVs, but they never worked together. And most of those studios blew up because they had proof that as an individual they were a great contributor, but they didn't have proof that they could navigate, the space with this group over a long period of time. So one of our positive pitches is, we've shown that this group can ship a finished product. Because especially if you get a whole lot of alpha type personalities in a room and everyone's really good at their job, everyone will try to steer in a different direction, and no one wants to collaborate. Everyone wants to be, Paul McCartney. No one wants to be Ringo.
Yeah, that's why there has to be a leader of the ship to be like,
I'm triggered.
this is the vision.
What's going on with you, Tina?
That is the most eloquent thing I've ever heard on this podcast, by the way. So thank you for that, because it is true. Like, working with a bunch of alphas, it's not easy getting anything done.
No,
and that's any industry, right? Ownership is complex, and you need centralization, and you can't have everybody be the central authority, especially when it's creative, especially when it's the personalities of people that make games, right? It's not going to work.
On that note, as a creative director, how do you know when to just sort of let go of something and just see what happens with it?
Oh, that's a tricky one, because it's so subjective almost. I probably, if you ran out there and interviewed everyone there about what's most annoying about me, they would probably, apart from being loud, they would probably say that I shoot from the hip a lot, and so I tend to say like the big picture, and I don't want to get stuck in the weeds. And I like iteration, so I'm always pushing to get it in the build, like get the dirty in the build, get it running, and then see how much we should finish it. Maybe it's enough, because the worst thing you can do is really, apart from wasting time, spend 6 months on a feature that was a 1 week feature. Then maybe it's a little bit better, but you're like, who cares? This is not relevant. So I tend to try to give up responsibility as fast as possible, and then get it in, because I think the faster you can get away from arguing semantics and on paper and into saying, but that's fine, that's funny. Like the silly example of slapping the bird. They argued, and I had to finally just go to an engine, like, just, can you stick it in? I got I walked an animation. I walked over to the animator, to Mike, give me an animation. And I walked the animation over to the engineer, and I was like, put it in. And he's like, how's it? Put it in now on this button. And then I showed it, right? And then everyone suddenly went, oh, that's actually pretty funny. And I'm like, I'm fucking strangle some people. But at least, get it out of the paper, because no one was going to believe me until they saw it. And I knew he'd do the weird hand, and I knew you'd be so close to it and all these things. But yeah, so sometimes it's by any means necessary, I think, just get it in.
Once people can feel it, it's like you can convince people so much more. Like, trying to explain a concept to someone, it doesn't work.
I like that. No. What you're saying is you don't really want to fight over hypotheticals until it's real.
No, and you can get it, and don't get stuck in the weeds. Like, obviously, one way to do it is say, all these are relevant issues which we'll deal with next. Like how will we tune it? And then what does this mean? We're going to have 400 of them? And you're like, I don't know, just get the little bit in. And then you say, oh, this is cool. We do want 400 of these, or, we want to deal with these issues. Maybe another silly example was, this one's a good one because I'm not sure, it's not a clean win, but in the new game recently, we had this idea that you could build your space trailer park, and you put down all these buildings and fill out the buildings. And then it was like, oh, we're making a really terrible Subnautica with no meaning in it, So we're like, we should just chuck it. And I was like, no, I think it should just happen automatically around you, so you don't feel there should be. You don't spend hours worrying about it, but you still get this feeling of expansion. And so that sort of worked, and then we got there pretty quickly. But it was still better to see it than to try and build this whole system over years and then plug it in and hope.
Have there ever been any systems or things in the game where you've been really excited about it, but once you've seen it in motion and the rest of the team see it, you think, actually, this wasn't what I thought it would be, and let's move on? All
the time, but I probably delete it from my memory as fast as possible.
Of course.
No, I was just trying to think, because you know what, that's another reason to do it like that, because you don't want to spend too much, too many cycles on it. That build it example is one. I thought it would be more satisfying just to put the buildings down. You're like, no, it's sort of fiddly and slow, and it feels like it should be more important because I spent so much time on it. So that one didn't work.
Yeah, I think it's also the implementing rapidly like that can lead to finding the problems, and then because you've implemented it, you find the creative solutions. And I'm a big advocate for innovations are born through frustration and not knowing how to get over a thing. That's how you come up with a creative solution, and going through that first step of rapid iteration, getting it in engine is how you get to that. So I'm with you on that.
And probably a good example then was like when we kept the interior customization and it had no meaning. So we were like, let's make it a joke that you're buying all the currency in the game is you're employed and then fired by a company called Alta Interglobal. And we're like, all the thing is in the Alta store and you can only buy it with Alta bucks that you find in abandoned coupon crates, around the world. And all the things do is like you can buy a hugging machine that just hugs you. Like it does nothing, like all the stuff inside. There's absolutely nothing. So we just decided to lean into it. And I watched like the game director, Steve Masters, his son is in the building today and he's 7. So we stuck him on a beanbag and playing the game. And the first thing he did was go in, he got some money, went back to his space trailer. He bought the hugging machine and he had the saddest hug with the robot. We were all sitting behind him going, yeah. Funny.
You kind of got a bit of
Amazing. No, that's nice.
His dad
you
was
whisper to him, it doesn't get better, kid.
He didn't hug his dad, hugged the robot in the game for no purpose.
Oh my god. That's gonna impact this boy. He's gonna be a better person.
He's gonna be thinking about it for a long time.
That's a cool memory.
Yeah. He's like, I don't know why I was hugging a robot.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
It's kind of like also making a currency that is practically useless in the grand scheme of things is a really nice genre commentary of always having collectible currencies and stuff like that, and what do you do with them, and that being a joke in itself. That's really interesting.
I mean, you could put on your journalist cap, Jay, and say, is it a political stance on capitalism or something?
Oh yeah. Let me make a 3-hour essay on that one currency.
Yeah, on
the
this
subtle
thing.
anti-capitalist undertones of Revenge of the Savage Planet.
Yeah.
Will that fit? I don't know. We have to make it work.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Okay, so we do have some questions that we should probably read through.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't feel bad reading this first one anymore. I was like on it in the beginning, but Sussyguru 2000 donates €5 and says, Jay, did you ever get answers to your several questions from the maker of Armpit Fart Tycoon? Is that really a game name?
So
Let me Google that real quick.
Armpit Fart Tycoon. This is, I kind of guess, going to humor. We make all of our ads here at Second Wind in-house. We when indie games, it's usually indie games because we really want to support indies, approach us and they want an ad to run on our shows. We usually make them for them and we run them. And we have a long-standing relationship with GameMaker, the engine, and we've made a few ads for them. And in the last one, because do design delve, I'm like design adjacent, I'm in the ad along with Yahtzee, and at the end, this was the line I didn't write, Jack Packard wrote it for me, but it's people have been making weird games in the trailer. We try and inject some of that humor that you were talking about into those ads, and the end of it is me asking why people had made Armpit Fart Tycoon. So it's not a real game, or at least I fucking hope it's not.
Not yet.
Yeah, I hope someone's not making it. But yeah, I didn't get any answers for that, and I hope I never do. I hope it continues to stay in the dark because I don't want to see mechanics for that.
I think we should take a couple minutes to just explore the concept a little bit.
Okay.
Armpit Fart Tycoon there's a business to this. It's not Armpit Fart Simulator, which should be more individualized, just like a guy doing armpit farts. There's a tycoon. How do you monetize armpit farts?
Well, if you wanted to make the comps, one of the first and most successful iPhone apps was the fart machine. The guy made $4 million in 3 months. It was 8 buttons, 8 different fights, and then a 9th random fight button, $3 million. So the comps say it's a winner.
Fart humor.
You're used to talking to publishers, and I love that.
Here's how this thing will make money.
This next slide of our competitors and comparables, if you take a look at this fart app.
Yeah, we'll see the graph of farts over time.
Is that 3 million, Alex? Interesting.
I think the Gen Zs, and maybe the audience can answer this, the Gen Zs are a little more squeamish than the Gen Xs, though. So I think we have an ad in our game for Burger Squirts, which is the squirtiest burger in the galaxy. And you bite it, and it just fountains squirt all over your face. And I kid you not, the Gen Zs in our team, they shield their eyes every time it comes up. They shield their eyes. So I don't know what's happening. Tina knows.
I mean, Tina is also doing the exact
shielding
same
my
thing.
eyes.
She knows. She's trying to keep the burger away from her.
It is disturbing, but I guess I'm just
Yes,
desensitized
oh my
to that
God!
stuff.
That trailer's amazing.
There it is. Look. Oh yeah.
Eric is,
I'd love to
for
see
those
the
of you who are
behind the scenes on how
listening,
that was put together.
we're watching a man get squirted in the face by the burger he's not able to bite.
He's grabbed that clip. You have to buy the game to see the whole 3 minutes.
Oh my God! There's a 3-minute Burger Squirts trailer.
No, it's a compilation. Yeah.
Testimonials. People talk about.
Guys, if you ever need a reason to go buy this game right now, I think Burger Squirts is you'll get.
Alex,
Yeah, it's
Alex,
a gateway.
I bet
my
you liked
God.
Conker's Bad Fur Day, right? This feels
we
like
were talking about that the other day. I bought, because there was about expensive games in Australia in the 90s. Conker's Bad Fur Day cost me $150, and that
Oh,
thing,
my
shit.
God!
so even Nintendo wouldn't do it. It was like this card. It was a brick. It was like they had to jam extra chips in it for all the audio. It's because it's back, in the Stone Ages. But yeah, it cost me $150.
Yeah.
Did like that. The song, the singing
Great
toilet.
Mighty Pooh.
Great Mighty
Yeah,
Pooh.
we were talking about that on Windbreaker with Yahtzee on Monday.
Really?
Yeah.
I played Conker's Bad Fur Day recently, like very recently. I think it was like late last year. I replayed it thinking, I'm probably going to put this down. It's going to be too juvenile. It's going to be too simple with the humor. I actually still found it pretty funny. And not just the scatological parts. I actually thought it was pretty cute and clever. I thought like, oh, it's just going to be a bunch of 90s and early 2000s memes, not early 2000s, 90s memes, references to films like The Matrix and whatever. But I thought it was pretty funny. I was surprised.
Yep.
Do you think that's because we get those references? You know?
You think say it again? If we get the
Do you
references?
think that's because we get those references, like, as an audience? Do you reckon if a Gen Z gamer got a hold of Conker's Bad Fur Day, they'd have the same reaction?
I think you're right. Like the segment at the end where it's the Matrix fight, they'd just be like, all right, that's the Matrix, okay. I don't think they'd find that particularly funny. The Great Mighty Pooh is timeless because it's this contrast of he's an operatic singer, but he's a big pile of shit. There you go. That's it. That's all you need.
Yeah, and you have to get the. Do you toss the toilet paper in or the corn in? Because the corn gets stuck. I forget.
He demands corn first. You come into this cavern of diarrhea shit, and it's just swirling around, and you hear, "Bring me some sweet corn." And Conker goes, "Well, that's what he wants." And you just throw these like humanized pieces of sweet corn that like have consciousness and sentience, but you throw them into the diarrhea, and they're his teeth that allow him to sing. Then when he's singing, you throw the toilet paper into his mouth, and that's what kills him and gunks him up. Eventually, enough for you to flush.
I just wanted listeners to understand that this is our Games as Art podcast episode.
Yes.
100%. Different. As my 9-year-old says when he eats sweet corn, it's not goodbye, it's see you soon.
Oh my God.
Your 9-year-old's a genius.
Yes, I don't think I think he got it from somewhere because he delivered it a while back with as though he was waiting for it.
He like prepped it like
with
like a spoonful or something. Like he recited it to the.
You gotta put that in a game sometime.
Exactly, just like in the back.
Like in a romance conversation or something.
A romance conversation.
Yeah, probably the most
corn?
thing in the game is the DLC is how to become the world's greatest streamer, and so you do all these irrelevant things. And so whenever it's seen, we've had people streaming the game, and whenever they get to that ad on the screen, they just pause. Their faces, and they're like, "Oh, yeah."
Oh,
so
no.
that's I still think I'm most proud of that.
Amazing.
Interesting. I think they'd appreciate that. The streamers that I know are self-aware, but I guess it depends on the person. Maybe you don't find it funny, even if you are self-aware. Who knows?
You know what's fascinating about your new game, your team's new game, is that it already feels like it has so much spunk and personality. So much more so than like the AAA games that we're getting with the big budgets. Like this has, I don't know how to say it, like life in it.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, hopefully, thanks. That was what we're going for, and like I think that's because we took risks, and then people I think within the team got on board with it. You know what I mean? And so they kept going in that direction instead of fighting it. I'm sure it's not everyone's taste. I'm sure there's people on the team who are like they get it, but they would have done it differently. But I think, especially because it's a sequel, we had one example from start to finish, and so I think that they got on board, which is cool.
Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, I think this conversation kind of went there anyways. It's like it's easier to influence or sort of motivate a small number of people versus like a really big team.
I think on a big team, it's management. Like it's not you have to actually not care so much that a lot of people aren't motivated and just manage the output, which is a bit sad.
Yeah,
it's a shame.
Now I'm sad.
That's the sham.
AAA.
Fortina over here, the AAA. The good crying face.
I was there. We've only been out for like 5 or 6 years. You can always escape, Tina.
You know what's funny is I think my most gut-wrenching meeting that I just thought of was I was working as a producer with UI, and we had like one executive come in and say, I'm going to look at this one screen of the UI, and I'm going to know what the Metacritic score is of this game. And I was like, what? And that was like that was how the conversation started for the whole, hour-long, 2-hour meeting or whatever. And I knew like, oh God, it's gonna be
a long meeting. It's gonna feel a lot longer than 2 hours.
I had a meeting with someone going over I will not name them, and I will not name the studio they're talking about, but they wanted to meet me to hear about my project and give me feedback and stuff like that. And they've been working in the industry 25 years, and for a portion of that, they had worked with a very prolific, troublesome creative director that I will not name. And they said that one of the things they would do would come back from holiday, walk into a room, press delete on a feature, and then go on holiday again. And that sounds like a nightmare. Like, work on this thing, and they just come and go, no, and just leave.
Delete?
There's bad personalities. Can you talk about what you mean by press delete on a feature? Is that as bad as it
let's
sounds?
let's say you're as a designer, you're working on like prototyping a feature or blah blah blah, and then someone comes in and just goes no without like discussion or reasoning or whatever, and then just leaves. So like,
they're breaking the build, right? Like, can't you just reverse Uno that shit in Perforce? Like,
yeah, you can, but
there's one thing there.
I can't go into too much detail because a lot of the stuff they said was
get rid of their
stuff.
obliterate permissions. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Well, this person you couldn't.
Dude, it's not. Yeah, I don't know. It's not fucking boot camp. You're not trying to subject people to immense stress and make them unhappy enough so they can like go to war, right? We're making video games. I don't understand. I'd be curious to hear from that person who did that deletion, like what their motivation was there, because that sounds so deliberate and specific. It doesn't sound like it was. It sounds like there must have been some sort of explanation, but I can't imagine what it could have been that would have made sense.
It's wild.
In the darkest days of EA, though, they used to say, stress creates diamonds. That's what they used to tell us. Back like
how nice.
2005. Well, I was on the team. You guys remember the EA spouse thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yahtzee made a video on it, yeah.
Wait,
that was your team?
We should probably...
My team. And they used to...
We should tell our listeners. Can we tell our listeners before we get into it? Like, what happened? Yeah.
Well, it was a lawsuit brought by the partner of a coworker of mine later about ridiculous hours we were working, and it was like they're just like our producer at the time had an open 24 hours neon sign like above his desk, and we were working like crazy hours, and it was a weird period where the teams weren't that big, so the 80 people or something, around that, but we were shipping say a Sims console game every year during that period, and so there was a lot of pressure, and so it ended up getting sued. And everyone got a payout, except, as I learned at my desk, if you're a producer or a designer, because you were considered in charge of the schedule. And so we got nothing. Yes. And so we could have gone up to, the bosses at EA and said, we don't want to do this schedule. We're not doing it for Christmas or anything like that. But anyway, that was a fun time.
Damn.
I know. And
I
think
ridiculous.
Because of your team, people that are hourly in AAA or people are hourly because of you guys in AAA,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
if you don't have control of your own schedule, you're potentially hourly, or most likely hourly at a studio.
Yeah, they brought that in straight after EA for exactly that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like California law specifically too. Yeah, so I thank you, because when I crunched in the very beginning of my career,
Yeah.
I made a lot of money.
Yeah.
I did 7-day work weeks for like 8 months, and I would never do that again.
No, but I think it's almost, I mean, it is a funny one. It's horrible and it shouldn't. It's a sign of bad planning or ridiculous schedules or a combo of the both or ridiculous expectations. Sometimes failure as well. But I sort of didn't mind it in my 20s. I kind of liked it. I had a bit of, I think it feels like you're on a sports team or you've gone to war or something. Like everyone's in the trenches together. So there's a satisfaction. Yeah. But yeah, it's good that you got paid for it, because in the old days it was like, you got a gold sticker.
Yeah.
I think Tim Schafer, he wasn't like advocating for crunch, but when we had him on, he made a similar comment, and it was something like, "Oh, well, when you're young and in your 20s, it's like you're either going to be working and being around people that like the same things you do, and you're excited and motivated. You also feel like a little bit of insecurity, a little bit of fear that like I got to be sure that I prove myself. They're doing it, I have to do it too. And it's either this or like go home to my apartment and like order a pizza and maybe play something, but I probably won't because I don't have the energy. So I'm more comfortable just working. But then when you get older, of course,
when you're younger and you have the energy and your lifestyle supports it, like it is intoxicating to be around, that kind of.
And I think the awful voice in the back of my mind though also makes I think that great art or great creations don't come from only doing 9 to 5 on the flip side. You know what I mean? I think there has to be a bit more somehow, whether it's just, it's in the back of your mind, or there's moments where you push or you take a big risk and the risk is going to take a big commitment, from you. I don't think anything that we love was made, calmly. So it's a difficult thing to think about, because I hate it. I miss it. I think it's crucial. I don't think we should do it. I think all these ideas are bouncing around at the same time.
Yeah. I get that. I really do. I think I think in these conversations, there's always like lines, and there's certain ones that everybody kind of agrees on, and then there's the fog or the ambiguity that you're describing, which is like, I mean, I've felt it too. I felt that a lot in Amsterdam. We were working on Sandstorm. Like I felt motivated to stay late and to put in all the time because we were excited and we were worried, and it's not great to live and work like that, but it happened, and it was for the better of the project. But then there's the lines where it's like, if the company's mandating it and it's like, if it's 7 days a week and it's not something you're personally invested in, that's fucking bullshit, right? So it really depends on the context too, I suppose, and the willingness of the person. Obviously, it's up to them. They shouldn't feel like they are forced.
I think it's when it's allowed but not in mandated is probably the line.
Yeah, which is tough because socially, like if they're doing it, I feel obligated to. Like, there's the other ambiguity too. It's very difficult to describe.
Well, I guess when I'm asked, like as a producer, how I feel about crunch, it's very nuanced, because like if everyone is passionate and on board with getting something done, and the last person in line, like the audio guy or girl, is going to get it, and potentially have to sign up to crunch too. As long as they're cool with it, then I'm cool with it. Yeah, because everyone knows what they're getting into, and I think that's for the best. Because you never know when creativity is going to hit, and when it hits, you want to like run with it. So,
passion, right? It's in the indie sphere. As someone who's making my first big game while juggling being a full-time YouTuber, right? Like most of my time is in evenings and weekends, and that kind of crunch. All crunch should come from a place of passion and willingness individually, rather than being told to do it. That's the issue. When you're told by your corporate overlord to stay late, that's different from, wow, what we're working on is really cool. I want to make sure this is the best it can be, and I'll put in X amount more hours to make that happen. It's passion is where it's at.
Which only becomes complicated when you're in the valley of despair. Because you weren't passionate about it, and now you're in the hole, and you've got to dig your way out.
Yeah. God.
I unfortunately have to leave very soon, Alex, but it's been an amazing pleasure talking to you, and I mean that wholeheartedly. But you have probably experienced the most change in the industry out of all of us, especially since, we were just talking about your experience in the beginning. What do you think is like the the best, biggest pivot that the game industry has made thus far?
I think the biggest one is online distribution, because when I started out, I would do some meetings. I'd have to go, sometimes fly to, they used to have a thing called Destination PlayStation and other things like this. Where you go, and I'm basically going to meet with Walmart and Walmart would come in and there'd be a bunch of people in suits with very thin ties. And then there'd be, Kmart, and then there'd be, all the different, Target, all the different retailers and all that sort of stuff to come in and talk to. And basically, if you couldn't convince them to put you on shelves, and then you couldn't convince them to get enough of them, you were dead before you released. Like you didn't exist, and there was no possibility of your game being discovered later or anyone knowing you even existed. So you sort of failed to fail, which was like this absolute abject horror, of like no one can even say no to the game because it's not there. Whereas now I think we're in a position where it can, even, and we saw it on the first game, it didn't have the usual AAA massive peak and then massive fall. It sort of trucks along. And this would never have been possible in the previous iterations of the industry, because the Target would never have ordered 500 more.
Yeah.
There was
fair point. We could talk all day about how saturated the market is now. It's hard to get noticed, but at least it's available. Yeah. What you're describing, you were literally not available. You could not be purchased.
And so that was why the big publishers could dominate, because they would say, I'm not shipping you FIFA unless you take these other games, and then they would fill their shelves. And there was literal no shelf space, like no shelf space for other titles.
Wow.
So or in the bottom right, so you were dead. And then so we're always available. But now, and maybe it's more akin to movies, now we're competing, though, which is even harder, with not just new releases. You're competing with the entire history of releases at all times. And you see things like GTA 5 has sold 100 million copies because it's still a great game. Or Red Dead Redemption is still a great game. So I don't think that's bad, but I think it does make discoverability harder and sales harder.
It's the same thing with shelves, right? It's less of shelf space and more of chart space.
Yep.
These games, especially from EA, will discount a lot of their big titles randomly, and they'll shoot up into the top 10 of even like the trending list, and that will completely kill indie games that deserve it. Goodbye, Tina.
Bye, Tina.
I hate that I have to leave early, but Alex, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tina.
Bye.
Bye, Tina. What we can do is we'll get through some of our donations and then see where it takes us. Because don't want to take this too long. But like, to finish my thought on that, there are a lot of indie games that probably deserve the spotlight, but aren't getting it because it's kind of weird that the AAA market is taking up the same space as the indie sphere. Like, part of me wishes that there was separate tabs on Steam for like small teams. Like these are indie games, right? These are independent games, kind of similar to like back in the day with Xbox, where you would have the arcade, where the live arcade, where it was you knew what you were getting were smaller scope indie projects. And I know a lot of people that just want to support indies because that's what they believe in. It's so hard to try and find them.
Well, and it's tricky because also, I knew Genova Chen for many years, and he's at That Game Company. Are they indie? They were, from the day one, they were fully funded by Sony. So you're like, they seem indie in every other respect. And then from the consumer perspective, it's just dollars, So even though really, our game is $30 and GTA 5 is $30, one cost, $300 million, $400 million to make, and now it's, much less. So I think it's tricky from the consumer perspective, what to articulate for them why it should be different as well.
Of course, it's difficult. Do you feel like you would prefer how it is now, where it's about charts rather than shelves, or do you?
Yeah, for sure.
Harken back.
Yeah, because I think the other one was just a hit-driven business. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't recommend something and go home and play it. So having availability is a huge boon. For sure.
Okay, let's skip through some of these donations. Got some more questions. Only a handful, which is good. We got Frilgamesh as part of the tip jar for now, which is awesome. Thank you, Frilgamesh. What a name. Durian Alaria has gifted Second Wind a membership, which is great. I'm not sure who got that membership, but congratulations to whoever got that. Objective Retrieve All the Frogs gives $5. Amazing name, thank you. It says RE Youth. To be honest, I'm nearly 30 and just getting into QA stuff. Then again, I'm younger than the entire Second Wind Gang team. Become ageless amalgam. Yeah, like age, experience. One of the things that I like to people always tell me that I'm so young because I'm 30. Is it's never too early or too late to do anything. Like if you believe in something and you want to put your life in a certain direction, do it. Right? We all weren't like Alex wasn't birthed into game dev. Like, what was your journey like getting into it? Like for you?
I started out in the old days. This pre-internet, trying to get a gig, and no one was hiring. And Australia, which originally had a very vibrant game scene, had a group called Beam Software, who made the world's first one-on-one fighting game where you have the exploding fist, and then went on to things like Shadowrun on the Super Nintendo, and they were quite a great little studio. But they got bought first by, I don't know who bought them, then Infogrames, and they've been passed around a little bit at that point. So there was no work there. So I started out writing articles for Amiga magazines in the UK. I was writing, and I had to write them out, and I'd print them and actually snail mail them, over there, and hope that they ran them and all that sort of stuff, because I didn't think I could get into games. And then eventually got, like I said, that first job at a place called Taurus Games. It was like an hour and a half commute out of town and an hour and a half back, like in a strip mall making Game Boy games in like 3-4 months at a rapid clip. So I think, the advice though is just get in any way you can and meet people.
Yeah, you can move within it, and the age doesn't matter too much. It really doesn't. You can teach yourself so much online. You can go to Udemy, you can go to YouTube. You don't even have to go to school. You don't have to spend the money. You just have to try. Just start making shit that's fun and neat. And if you get bored of it, then, it wasn't for you. It was a fun experiment. If you're not, you keep going. It is for you, and just see what you can do. I think you're right, Alex. Yeah. Get your foot in the door. QA role's fine. That can easily move into others. I've had direct reports, one in particular, who started from QA, came into design, and was excellent at it. It made sense. It happens all the time. People from community go into production. Like it goes like that.
And generally, people from journalism go into PR.
Yeah, or writing. Yeah. I've seen a lot of journalists go into writing and shit. But
all I can advise is, as someone who also taught game design and sound design uni, as a lecturer, is portfolio is king. If you're going into QA role, you're going to get some valuable experience in a lot of different areas, but also don't expect to just be plucked out like the fat fish and be moved into a different role out of nowhere. You have to have initiative. You have to have drive, and also hopefully start building up a portfolio within the field you want to move into. You're going to have a much greater chance of being pulled into the wider team if you, like, as a designer, you have a portfolio of like different aspects that you've designed and suggestions for the game and stuff like that. That's how you're going to get noticed. It's not just going to happen randomly like a princess.
Be a little pushy and find the problem area and say, hey, I could do that, Mr. or Mrs. Producer. And they'll go, thank God, please, yes, do that.
Please do.
It can easily happen. Yeah.
Advice actually is you're there to add value, and if you add value, people will give you opportunities.
Yeah.
100%.
All right. Oh, objective, Retrieve All the Frogs, again with $2. Says a comedy game, Secret Agent Wizard Boy. That's the game that is made by a small indie team, I believe. They're making effectively the PS1 Harry Potter game again.
Oh,
but it's not Harry Potter IP.
One.
Like, why?
Yeah, what team is that? Oh, it's fucking David Zemansky. I don't know how to say his name. I think that's it. Zemansky from fucking New Blood, from fucking Dusk. That's awesome.
Yeah, and as we can see what Alex was going on about, if we take a look at this trailer, a lot of these systems look like they're built for ludic humor. They're all there to interact with each other to create. There's some ragdoll stuff like that. They're all there to create those funny moments with other people and interactions for NPCs. So I'm sure that is funny. That's in early access, right? I believe
it is. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. And let me correct. Sorry, it's published by David Zemansky, who did Dusk and I think was a part of New Blood. It's developed by John and Evan Zemansky, who I assume have some relation. And I think it's funny because I'm already laughing at the name. Secret Agent Wizard Boy and the International Crime Syndicate is the full name.
I love it.
What a great name. Yeah, 100%. And our final donation, Evil Engine number 9 with $2 says, oh, damn, here's Ludo money. Yeah, Ludo is a money generator. Where is she? Ludo, come here.
Go get your dog and get us more dollars, Jay. Wake her up.
Let's see if we can generate some revenue. Come here, Ludo. Come here. Ready? Steady?
There we go. Oh, the subscriptions are elevating.
Is that a schnoodle?
No, she's a Clumberdoodle. So she's a mix between a Clumber Spaniel and a poodle. It's kind of like a cockapoo, but according to my vet, much rarer because Clumbers are rare. Yeah, you probably on the back of my business card that I gave you. She's on it. Because she's in my show. It's animated. Off your pup.
So
it's animated, and Ludo is the co-host, who is arguably more popular than I am, which is great for her, not so much for me. That's just the way it is, Cute dog. But yeah, thank you so much for your donations. I think for us, Alex, this has been like a really, really fascinating conversation. Like your breadth of experience and just perspective on the industry is really inspiring for me personally, as someone who's just taking their first steps into, like, I've been teaching and been in the education space and being a game dev YouTuber for the last 5 years, but as someone who's taken my first steps into really taking a proper good shot at my first big project, it's really inspiring to hear your journey and where you've got to with your team. It's been super fascinating.
Cool. Hopefully you like the new game. It's out now, as they say.
Hell yeah, guys. Go check it out.
You want to give it to everybody one more time? Where can they find it?
Yep. Revenge of the Savage Planet out now on PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, Epic Game Store. Right now, please go buy a copy.
Wherever you get your games. God, I can't believe you shipped it on all the platforms.
Yeah, I know. It's foolish. That's what that was. Never doing it again.
All right, and before we wrap up, Fungus Finder with $2 says dosh for dogs. Thank you so much. We got more bucks for dogs.
More bucks.
We got it. All right, so she's not here, but thanks to Tina and Mikee for joining us on this podcast. It's been super fun. And thank you to our producer, Eric, in the background, being a wizard, getting all these clips instantaneously. I still don't know how you do it. But yeah, so from all of us here at DevHeads, thank you so much for the support, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.